I'm pleased to introduce Joe. He's a psychologist and the founder of Refuge, which is a clinic in Montreal that specializes in transformative psychotherapy. He's a certified mindfulness facilitator, and he's taught in clinical, healthcare, and corporate settings since 2010. He's been on a lifelong journey, and we get to be the beneficiaries of that in the pursuit of the most effective approaches for cultivating well-being, both his own and those of his clients. So he's here to help us through our own development, through our own healing and our transformation as we continue to do the important work we do in hospice palliative care. So, Joe, thanks so much for joining us. We look forward to hearing from you about how we can turn our jackals off. Melanie Sears uses the term jackal for those voices. So we'll look forward to that in your talk.
That's super. Thank you so much for the intro. I'm in Montreal, and there's a famous neuroscientist named Sonia Lupien, and she specializes in stress. And in Quebec, people refer to the hamster, the internal hamster. The jackal's a lot more aggressive. Yeah. So interesting. I guess that's just what happens over time. We're more stressed, and the internal voices become more intimidating. In any case, yeah, the internal jackal or hamster, very relevant to our theme. Really nice to be with you. Really nice. Thank you for the opportunity to share this brief period with you all. I just wanted to say that, yeah, so I have been teaching MBSR and MBCT, which are two clinical mindfulness programs for many years. And I have since broadened my practice to include working with psychedelics like psilocybin. And that has brought me into interaction more with end-of-life distress and the kind of work that you all do. And I just wanted to say that I so appreciate what you do. And I actually have a really nice relationship with the doctor that helped me and my family through my mom's death. And so just coming at this from a very personally meaningful vantage point. And again, it feels like a privilege to be able to share this time with you today. And so to dive into mindfulness, it sounds like you've already been exploring the topic and some practices. So that'll save me from, covering some of the basics. I have some slides. I might show them, I might not. Let's just see how it goes. I want to start by doing something kind of unusual, especially for a workshop with 114 people. But I'm going to do it anyway, because I find this is just, it can be so powerful. So I've got a little second hand on my watch, and I'm just going to let the second hand go for about 1 minute. Okay. And during that minute, I'm going to invite you to do something very unusual, which is to do nothing. Okay. And so this would mean, putting down just forgetting about the laptop for a second, or, if you're writing with a pen. This is not a meditation or a mindfulness practice. There's no intention here. There's no need to do anything. You don't need to get into a yoga posture and get all ready to breathe, nothing like that. This is really just an experiment to see what happens when we do nothing. Okay. So, I'm going to start the timer now. So I'll invite you to just sit back, do nothing for about a minute. I'm going to do the same thing, and we'll pick up in about 1 minute. Okay, that was 1 minute. I'd like to take a couple minutes here to hear from you all. As many people that feel like sharing, feel free to throw it into the chat or just speak up. Merci Marie-Claude for the shout out to Sonia. She's fantastic. I agree. Just seeing the chat now. So if you don't mind, either raise your hand or put into the chat. During that 1 minute, what did you notice your mind was up to? What did you notice? What happened? Robin, please.
It felt like a whole lot longer than a minute.
Yeah. Anything else to share? So it felt longer. What was actually going on in your mind?
It was just a little bit scattered. I kept staring at you going, is my minute done? Are we there yet? And it was really staring at the clock that's timing me that I've been on here for how long going, okay, it's got to be close to my minute. I'm watching you stare at your clock and I'm like, really? It's only been a minute? Like all of that's just spinning through your head going like, gracious, it's been a minute.
Yeah, I totally shared the neurotic preoccupation with time. You saw me checking my watch several times right there with you. I'm going to head over to the chat unless there are people that want to speak live. So Lauren writes, lots of wandering. Mine was thinking about so many things from Sabika, trying to think about task to finish, could not get my mind to rest, overthinking. My mind starts telling me things. I had to think about doing nothing. I was going crazy. Thank you for sharing that, Lisa. I share your bafflement there. How to fight the urge to move. Okay, really interesting. I focused on really keeping still and enjoying the calm around me. Okay, so Judy kind of settled into some kind of quiet concentration there. It took a lot of focus not to try to focus on anything. Initially, I focused on my breathing. Cheater, not supposed to do any meditation, but that's okay. Everyone does that. But ended up drifting off and thinking about my to-do list. Okay, so and on and on. You get the picture. Okay. Incredibly common. Oh, looks like there's a bit of a thread here. I became very much more in tune with the sounds around me. Very interesting. We're going to come to that in a second. Yeah, that happens a lot. Okay. How lovely it is to sit here in peace and calm. So part of that is, oh my God, are we ever busy? So much to do. And, you know, it's funny because I used to do these workshops. Probably the first one I did was like 2013 or 2014. And I look back on how easy and straightforward life was in 2014 compared to now. It's like a joke. It was already overwhelming, like life at work, life in hospitals, life in corporate settings, life for health professionals was already totally overwhelming in 2014. And it has gotten worse. I suspect most of you would agree with me there. So we're busy. We're not used to doing nothing, even though that can be a very restorative activity. And there's something, you know, of course, we're in this strange context where it doesn't really make sense to do nothing, but still, what happens for most people when we stop is the mind wanders, and it often wanders to things we have to do or some kind of like awkward reflection on what's happening right now, some story about what's happening right now. Is it a minute? Has it been a minute? Must be a minute. The chatter. I'm not sure we're reaching jackal level, but there's some internal chatter, right? And that's just how it is when the mind is at rest. Okay, I'm going to show you a quick slide to put some imagery into the mix here. So here's the slide. Okay, so you may have heard this before. I think it's super valuable to be aware of. There is a network in the brain that becomes activated when we're not engaged in goal-directed activity, and it's called the default mode network for that reason. Okay, so they discovered it because so neuroscientists were studying people or conducting a neuroimaging study and noticed there was a huge amount of activation in the brain when people were just lying in the scanner not doing anything. And this was, I think, in the 90s. And the sort of discussion was like, we're asking people not to do anything, but the brain is lighting up like crazy. What's the deal? And so they started to investigate this strange phenomenon. And it turns out when people are asked to do nothing in the scanner, their minds wander and this network switches on. It's called the default mode network. This is, again, the network that switches on when we're not engaged in goal-directed activity. And it typically involves thinking about oneself and thinking about the past, present, and future. So, the past and the future. So what I'm showing you here is just the different regions in the brain that make up the network. And there's even some, interesting more granular understanding of this network that, particularly when people are preoccupied with something in the past, it's these two regions, the lateral parietal cortex and the posterior cingulate, that light up. And then other portions of the brain that light up that are thinking about the future, my to-do list, or commentary about the present. Has it been a minute? This is taking a long time. I have to think about not thinking and blah, blah, blah. So in this cool little experiment, I managed to activate the default mode network of most of you in this virtual room. Super cool. The problem is that it becomes quite overwhelming and it sort of takes over. And in some ways, we have no other possibility, no other way of quieting the default mode network other than engaging in more goal-directed activity, shut down the chatter by just doing more, which is kind of the problem in the first place. Doing more, being busier. Okay, I'm going to stop the share for 1 sec. Checking back in with you. Everyone with me so far? Any questions? Okay. So we've activated the default mode network. It often involves thinking about the future or the past, or having some narrative, some top-down cognitive commentary about the present. Some of you may be aware of this notion from evolutionary psychology that the human brain has a negativity bias. Okay, that means we're simply more likely to attend to negative information, remember negative memories, and contemplate negative possibilities in the future. There's a whole evolutionary explanation for that, which we can get into. But when we're thinking about the future, more often than not, it's about all the things we haven't yet done or all the terrible things that could go wrong. And when we're thinking about the past, it's often the horrible thing I said yesterday or why that person was so mean to me last week. And so we're just feeding our nervous systems this drip of negative stuff, anxiety-producing stuff. This is the default mode of the brain. How awful, right? The thing is that there is a better way, right? And this is what the whole notion of mindfulness enters, and the whole notion of sort of training the brain, tuning the instrument, our nervous system that we rely on so much every day. And so I'm going to jump back over to the slide deck here. So many of you would be familiar with the fight or flight response. Whoops. Okay. The fight or flight response. You could see here an antelope and a lion. And things are not looking so good for this poor little antelope. He's about to be caught, or she is about to be caught by the lion. And we're catching this scene a few minutes in, because a few seconds before this, that antelope was having a drink by the watering hole and just chilling out with his or her friends, and everything was fine. Except somewhere, suddenly, its nervous system detected the threat. This lion was sort of lurking in the bush. And before this antelope had the opportunity to understand what was going on, his or her body was already running away. Okay? Sadly, in this case, probably not fast enough. And we all know this is what happens when a threat emerges in our environment. There's a whole series, a cascade of biological events that makes us especially prepared to deal with the threat, to run away or to freeze or to fight. And you can see these things, the heart rate goes up, the respiration rate goes up, pupils dilate, blood pressure goes up, muscle tension goes up. All of these things, it's super automatic, super overriding mechanism, and it's all designed to get us to safety as quickly as possible before we even know that we're doing it. This is a picture of that antelope brain. On the bottom, the top is a human brain. And I hope what you'll notice is that there's actually a lot of similarities between the two. The biggest difference being, of course, the cortex, the big green layer on top. What that means is the amygdala, the stress response, the fear response, it's exactly the same architecture. It's exactly the same machine in both the antelope and the human, but the humans have this extra layer on top of it. So what does that mean? We don't need to be exposed to something like this to enter into a stress response. All we need is something like this. Okay? We can contemplate the future. We can imagine threats. We could remember something terrible that happened yesterday. And we're engaging all of this circuitry. Okay? We're feeding our nervous systems the possibility of threat all the time. And so this is a costly thing. These habits that we have are very costly, but it doesn't have to be that way. Again, there are skills and habits we can learn. That's what this practice is all about. That sort of diminishes the proclivity to engage the stress response or the overwhelm feeling or the depressed feeling or the super anxious feeling, whatever state your nervous system gravitates to that your mind keeps feeding to you, there's better habits to cultivate. And I'm assuming that the mindfulness stuff that you've done so far today all sort of speaks to the same theme. Okay. What do I have here? Yeah. The antelope, we're now looking at zebras. I don't know why I switched animals, but we're now at zebras. If the zebra manages to survive the lion chase, it just goes right back to drinking water with his or her buddies, right? But not us, right? It stays with us, right? We ruminate, we carry with us, we dream about it, all these things, again, because that top cortical layer of our brains. So we're just, this chronic activation of our nervous systems in this way. The opportunity, again, is to cultivate the skill, this practice of mindfulness. And I've just offered a couple definitions. The most common one is the bottom one. You've probably heard it. It's a kind of awareness that's developed by paying attention in a particular way, in the present moment and non-judgmentally. So it's orienting ourselves into the present moment. It's being open and flexible with whatever is showing up. I really like Ron Siegel's definition as well. Awareness of present moment experience with acceptance. So simple and yet so hard at times. So that's my little kind of like spiel. Just checking in to see if there are any questions about the story so far before we actually try it out. Is there 3 responses: fight, flight, and freeze? The answer to that is yes. Let's see, Burgundy, did you want to say more about that question, or tell me more about what you have in mind there?
I was just hi.
Hi.
I was just curious because I've heard that like we usually think of fight or flight, but I remember that there's some people that think of fight, flight, or freeze.
Yes.
And then Ruth also mentioned that there's fawn, which
Yes.
I'm not familiar with fawn.
Yes. These are all correct. And I'm sort of going with an old school, very basic model. But these are all different responses to threat. And sometimes even the freeze, for example, would be a response if the threat continues to escalate, right? So it might be, first response would be like run away.
Mm-hmm.
You run, but then you get trapped. You have no choice. You fight. The threat continues to escalate. One strategy that some mammals use, including humans, is freeze. This is the deer in the headlights phenomenon. Some animals will just play dead, right? It's a famous fear response or trauma response. Interestingly, so playing dead is a form of freezing. And I learned recently that the possum is the famous animal that plays dead. And the reason that fear response evolved is because the predators that chase the possum, their visual system is especially good at detecting movement. So if the possum stops moving, it sort of disappears from the lion's perceptual system. And that is how some, millions of years of evolution of possums arrived at this solution. So freeze is another one. Fawning is another one. If you are being threatened by, I don't know how far down the mammalian chain this goes, but fawning is a way of like submitting to the will of some threat or some predator. And so it's being friendly, it's being agreeable, and this often happens in social situations where there is a strong, perhaps threatening figure, and instead of fighting and running away, you can just be friendly and agreeable and not cause too much trouble. Okay, so these are all different adaptations to threat. Did that answer your question?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Right, no problem. Okay. So, any other questions about the little context piece that we've done so far? Okay. So what I'd like to do now is actually do a mindfulness practice. And we are going to move into something a little bit more formal, which would be, I'll guide you through this, but, finding a posture that's conducive to concentration. This is a tough time of day to do this, right? It's 3 o'clock. You have been, your brains have been busy working, and it might be difficult to concentrate or sustain attention. It might be easy to fall asleep, actually. And so the idea would be to find a posture in your chair that is comfortable, but also will be conducive to concentrating, because we want to be awake. This is all about wakefulness. And so I'll invite you to do that as we get started, but just to sort of offer the principle there. And a second thing I'll offer is to really treat this like another kind of experiment, right? What happens if I try to use my attention in this other way? Okay, we've tried doing nothing, and we notice that the default mode network turns on for most of us. What happens if we do nothing but in this particular way? And this way is with an intention to hold attention in the present moment, okay? With a kind of open and curious attitude. And that's where this idea of treating it as an experiment. What happens? Oh, look at this. My mind just went over there. How interesting. I'm going to bring it back. So there's kindness, there's flexibility and willingness to follow whatever happens during this experiment with the intention to keep coming back to the present moment. And we often will use some kind of anchor for attention. You're probably familiar with this, and it's the breath. It could be anything that's really available in the present moment. For some people, and this is important, the breath or anything in the sort of chest or upper body area can be triggering. Some people get really anxious when they focus on their breathing. So I find noticing the expansion and contraction of my belly is an excellent anchor, but there are many others. Again, listen to sound, feel the sensations of the chair under your butt or your feet on the ground. Any stimulus that is available to you in the present moment, often through your body and your senses, is a great anchor for this practice. Okay. So I'm going to, again, do a little timer. We're going to sit and practice this for 5 minutes, and then we'll take some time to inquire together after. Does anyone have any questions about this experiment we're about to do? Okay, excellent. I'm actually going to sit down so I can join you. So now would be the right time to, again, find a comfortable posture in your chair. And many people find it sometimes easier to concentrate on and keep attention on the anchor with the eyes closed. So you're invited to do that. And let's just transition into that. So closing the eyes, if that's comfortable for you. And just noticing again with that curiosity, what's it like when you close the eyes and orient towards more inward perception? What's the internal environment like? How's the breath? How's the mind? Is it busy and active? It may be helpful to take 2 or 3 deep calming breaths. A nice deep inhale and then a slow, smooth exhale. Sometimes that could just help calm some of the agitation or restlessness. Just noticing what's already here again, the level of thinking, the level of how one feels, exhausted, stressed, sad, joyful, peaceful, all is welcome. What's happening at the level of body sensations, getting curious about that as well. Is there discomfort from sitting? Does it feel nice? And then transitioning now to finding that anchor. So it could be the sensations of breathing at the belly or the chest. It could be sound. It could be the sensations of the legs or the back against the chair, feet against the ground. Any one of those is fine. And we step into this practice now with an intention to hold our attention on this anchor and getting really curious what the mind is up to. Is it wandering off to some other thing? Are we able to bring it back? Even if that happens 1,000 times, it's just a really interesting experiment. Just noticing if attention is being pulled away. And if that is the case, really gently, with kindness, letting go, starting again, coming back to the anchor. Just becoming curious about what it's like to work with attention in this way, with no agenda. There's no mountaintop to get to here. There's no Himalayan mountaintop to look out from or special state to achieve. It's very simple. Opening up to whatever is here. And seeing if it's possible to fully accept, to fully be with whatever that is, even if it's unpleasant, even if there's lots of mind wandering. It's a kind of radical act of self-care. To imagine that there is nothing else that needs to be done right now other than being fully present with what is already here. Now, expanding awareness from the anchor. So whether it's sound or body sensations or any other anchor into the present moment, the idea now is to expand. So taking in, if it's a body sensation, the entire upper body, for example. If it's a sound, expanding to the head, the whole upper body. And so noticing slowly as you expand from the anchor, you take in more and more of the body. So you've got the whole upper body, the head, including now the arms and the hands. All the contact with the chair, tabletop, if there is any, and continuing down and opening up and expanding to include the legs and the feet as well. Noticing if it's possible to cultivate this broader, more expansive, more spacious awareness. Body as a whole, body in contact with the chair, the floor, even the air that we're swimming in currently. And knowing that we're going to come back into contact with each other as we come back into our group here, but just taking a moment, if it feels right, to acknowledge your own experience. If there's any insight or any clarity that emerged or any intention for the rest of the day or the rest of the week or month or whatever. And really at your own pace, when it feels right, when it feels complete, you're welcome to open your eyes and bring your attention back into our group. Okay. So I'm seeing some eyes open and some people paying attention, the people that have their cameras on. Super curious just to hear what you noticed, perhaps in contrast to the first exercise we did where the intention was to just do nothing. So here we were doing nothing, but there was a slightly different framing to it. So feel free to report back in the chat, speak up, raise your hand. All forms of sharing are welcome. What did you notice?
This one compared to the first, the 5 minutes didn't seem that long. There was more of a focus
Yeah.
on doing nothing versus
Yes.
just doing nothing and thinking about doing nothing.
Mhm.
I was focusing, and I did find that, like, with the guided kind of meditation, but then you had about what felt like a minute where you were silent, and then it's like, oh God, did I fall asleep? Should I peek out and see if you're still there? Like, I lost my focus, but then when your voice came back in, it
Yeah.
allowed me to kind of bring myself right back in again and focus on what we were doing.
Cool. So the sort of sense of concentration was stronger, more stable and steady in this exercise compared to the other one. Yeah. Yeah. Great. Sounds like my voice provided some support for that. My guidance. Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Anne-Marie. A couple comments in the chat. So easy to bring the mind back, but also tired. So easy to just have to sleep at times. Yeah. This is so common, and someone else, I guess, amplified that share. If you're like many of the people I know, we're extremely busy. And again, the time of day is part of it, but we're extremely busy. We're going at 140 kilometers an hour on the highway, and then suddenly we stop. And whew, it's heavy, it's tiring, right? And it's almost like we only have 2 speeds. And so I don't know if this resonates at all, Chantal, but there may be an invitation there to play around with different speeds, full speed, half speed, relaxing. And the invitation here is to be calm and relaxed, but also alert and awake. We want that. We need that for our lives to feel rich and meaningful. So yeah, for many people, it's when I'm not fully on the go, I'm sleeping, and especially at 3:30 in the afternoon after a long day. Understanding I need to give myself a little more grace and space. Not sure I give myself even this small amount of space to connect with. Thank you, Samantha. It's quite amazing how hard this is to do, right? To carve out the time to do that. And yet it's so simple. And then, yes.
Also, I focused on my breathing, but it's funny, I'm sitting by my window with the blind down. I live in a small town, but on a main street, so there's a lot of traffic outside. But
Yeah.
focusing on my breathing, I'd hear it intrude once in a while. But then even when a truck went into its back brakes, whatever, air brakes, but it just, if I kept going back to my breathing, it just became more distant, that intrusive sound.
Right. So
Yeah.
just again, more concentration, more immersion in present moment experience, and better able to filter out distraction. Yeah. Thank you, Anne.
I wanted to say, this past week, I've been so incredibly anxious all day, all the time. And that quick 5 minutes was the first time in weeks where I actually felt like there was just nothing going on. And it was the most peaceful 5 minutes of my life. So thank you. I know that sounds really dramatic, but like that, I feel so emotional. Like that was just so calming. And I feel like I just really needed that.
Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And I'm so happy. It's beautiful. And isn't it incredible? We often, especially as busy professionals, we want to relax. We want to like take it easy. But setting out to relax is actually really hard, right? It's like trying to get your nervous system calm down and get it to a state we want it to be in, as opposed to fully surrendering to the present moment can be the most relaxing thing, even if the present moment isn't super pleasant. So thank you for sharing that. And I'm very happy if people felt a sense of relaxation or peace, and also very curious and welcoming people that had a terrible experience. If it was made you more anxious or it was made you uneasy or restless, welcome that feedback as well. Any other? So yeah, so that's what we've noticed. There was a couple of takeaways here, like I need to give myself a little more space to do this sort of thing. Any other takeaways from these two experiments? What are you taking away from, or what are you learning from this so far?
I'm just going to jump in.
Please.
I think what you had mentioned just now, and I feel like I have delved into this a little bit, and I need more practice because I never feel successful in being able to do this. And I feel like I spend so much of my time actually trying to block out external stimuli because I'm oversensitive to things. And I get that just the things around me will be bothering me. And perhaps the environment in which I'm trying to do this now, I'm starting with too much of a hill to climb and too many external stimuli to block out, and I need to start in a less stimulating environment and practice my ability to block that out and build that up, because I have found when I have tried to meditate and be quiet, and you talk about focusing on the things around you, then I just feel irritated by the sensations and the sounds and the smells around me, and then it almost makes it feel worse. So I suspect that comes with some practice.
Yeah. That's super helpful, Megan, and so much there. Many of you probably heard this kind of framing before, but learning mindfulness is like any other skill. Playing tennis, learning to cook, playing a musical instrument. it's hard at the beginning, especially to ramp up the skill, because this is a skill. We're developing a habit, and it's hard to do that. It takes a lot of energy to cultivate this habit. And so, yes, starting with manageable challenges at first. And if you're learning to play tennis, you don't go play Roger Federer in your first week, right? It's actually and like practicing in a noisy environment, hoping to have perfect concentration is like playing Roger Federer in the first week. So starting small, and yeah, these little adjustments you're making or plan to make is right on the money. It's just, okay, well, I'm too sensitive, so I'm going to get distracted. I'm going to try to find somewhere quiet, or put in headphones or earplugs or something, because finding a quiet environment's not easy. But yeah, these little wins, 5-minute sessions that feel like there's some degree of concentration and immersion is great. And it doesn't have to be 30 minutes twice a day. You start slow and build up the habit over time. Practice, practice, practice.
No, I just wanted to say, further to what Megan was sharing, like the frustration when things aren't going well. Like I noticed for me, this wall behind me is a shared wall with the townhouse next door. And like the little girls are home from school at this point, and I could hear them squealing. At first I was irritated.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, let me just get curious about that. Like, can I like be with their giggles and stuff in a different way instead of being irritated? So like, I don't know, maybe it's a little bit of redefining what practice is, right? Can we play around with it and just see if we could hold things differently? Or
So what happened after you switched your intention there?
yeah, it helped. Yes, I wasn't like, oh, enough, you know. Like my first thought was like, I want to bang on the wall, and that,
Yes.
that dissipated. I was able to sort of be with their giggling in a different way.
And then it goes from, banging on the wall or like waiting for them to stop or wondering them to stop to it's now part of your practice. And it does mean that you're no longer practicing with the anchor that you set out to practice with. And that sucks for the part of you that wanted to do that. But there's been a shift in your resistance, and now you can do child giggle meditation.
Totally. I like the shift in the resistance was definitely, that helped.
Yeah, that's awesome. I have another question for you all, which I'm happy to sort of let open up into something broader. And actually, I'll launch into it with one of the comments from earlier about, hey, it's weird. I'm suddenly more sensitive to the sound in my environment, right? Which is very common and really interesting. We, especially in professional settings, operate in a particular mode. It's often verbal, it's often analytical, it's very cognitive and top down. I don't know, but I suspect in the work that you all do, you do have to be connected to your emotions to some extent. So I suspect that you have that input online as well. But just in our culture in this day and age, with the proliferation of information technology and social media and things like this, we are often in an analytic cognitive mode. And part of what's interesting about mindfulness is an opportunity to switch out of that mode and actually open up to other channels. And then that pops in. It's like, I close my eyes and suddenly I'm hearing more, or I'm emotional, or whatever. And this has been extremely valuable to me as a therapist, where I have to, as a psychologist, I have to be tracking things cognitively, of course. But if I get locked into that channel, I'm not going to be a good psychologist. And so my mindfulness practice is a way to keep open all these other channels and stay available for the emotional resonance that's required. So my question for you all is, how do you think something like this, a practice like this, whether you do it, 2 minutes in the morning or at lunch break or however you practice it, how might it be helpful to you in your work?
I think for me, just simply taking the time to do it for myself.
Yep.
Just giving myself more value. I'm not always staying in that rushing, trying to get things done through the day, that I'm actually going to take time for myself. And then the benefits just that I felt in those 5 minutes, to take those 5 minutes every day kind of just regroups clears my thoughts. And just the fact that it kind of, wow, taking control of myself in a busy day where I felt maybe sometimes I don't have control.
Yes. Thank you so much, Emery. I'm totally with you. And you may have heard this phrase in mindfulness culture, responding instead of reacting, right? Again, we're busy. We often just are going from one crisis or one intense situation into the next and on autopilot. And sometimes we have no choice. We have to do that. But it's a very different experience if we're responding, which is calmer, have more capacity for reflection, choosing to act in ways that are intentional as opposed to automatic. The capacity to respond instead of react is probably one of the most important gifts of a mindfulness practice. So totally with you. A couple of things coming in on the chat there. De-stress. Learning how to de-stress instead of waiting until the end of the day and we're gassed, totally. And I think this is probably clear to everybody, but I just want to reiterate, part of what keeps the stress alive over the course of the day is the mind's tendency to keep chewing on it, right? Something really stressful can happen in the morning, and we're holding on to that stress, keeping it alive by continuing to think about it or process it later in the day, and that's exhausting. And so there are many sources or triggers for stress, but one of the things we can do is to practice letting go and recentering in the present moment. So yeah, de-stressing is a really valuable thing. There's a few comments here about self-care, right? And it's quite interesting because somebody put it there, just like that kindness. There's something kind about carving out the time to just be fully present with oneself. And it's really hard. I never said anything about kind, right? Being like, there's nothing inherent in the practice, and yet it feels like there's a kind of compassion coming on when we practice in this way. So yes, the opportunity is there to reconnect with oneself.
Joe, I think one thing that stands out for me too is that I think this practice can allow me to be fully present
Yes.
in the moment, even when I'm with like a patient, for example. If I've attended to those needs and just kind of grounded myself, it allows me to be more fully present.
Yes.
Or I feel more capable of being fully present. Maybe that's what it is.
Yes. We all have the experience of being with somebody and having 3 other tabs open on the browser of our consciousness, right? And it's just like sucking energy and sucking our resources. This is a way of being fully present for connection, which I'm guessing is quite important in your line of work.
Yeah, for sure.
So Kelly, I'm guessing this would be in reference to like doing a practice before, and this would be the benefits after. Have I understood you correctly?
Yeah. Well, just even going through that 5 minutes, like I can see how I feel more in the moment.
Yeah. Yep. Great. Right. So there's a comment here from someone with the name iPad. I'm guessing not their real name. Interesting comment about the scripts just dropped in that 5 minutes. Preoccupations, assumptions can get in the way of what is real, what is here and now. Patient care looks and feels different in this space. So I wonder if we can actually hear more about what is meant by the scripts. I think I get it because I can relate to it, but yeah, is that person available to share?
Yes, I'm not able to turn my camera on, but I'm happy to speak to this. Yeah, I think by the scripts, I was just mainly thinking about productivity and the pressure to, especially in a bereavement space, as a bereavement counselor, just making all the contacts and all the right ways and reaching people and just having these at times unrealistic expectations of one, my capacity, but also two, what these interactions might look or feel like. And so this exercise was really, really powerful just to see that virtual reality, if you will, kind of fall away, and the openness that I can give myself before each interaction, which the patient will feel too. So really appreciated that opportunity.
Super. Thank you so much. It's really interesting. I don't know if any of you have come across predictive processing theory, but it is a sort of newish and a popular way of understanding perception and how our brains help us navigate the world. And basically the idea is that we're mostly top-down modeling, right? There's actually very little bottom-up sensory information that comes into our experience. And so when we go off and interact with somebody, it's our model of that person that we're interacting with. Not very rarely is it the raw data coming in from them directly. And when we're stressed or when we're rushed or whatever, it's like even more, we're just interacting with our mind's representation of that person. But when you really drop in, you actually open up to more information from the bottom up, what's really happening there, not this model of the person, but the person and the data coming from them in itself. And in my experience, the way that last person shared, those are the richest, most meaningful connections available to really open up to that bottom up, what's really there, as opposed to just working with our models of the world. We're coming up on time, and I'll wrap this up, and assuming there's no other questions. Maybe I'll just see what Michaela wrote here before we break. Mindfulness, helpful to get a place mentally where I'm able to recognize the gravity of the situations, the people I work with, and to be able to be present with them and empathize with their experience. Yeah, very aligned with, I think, what we just said. So thank you so much for your attention, for your engagement, for practicing with me, for sharing, and taking this time to connect in deeper than what we often do over the course of the day. If anyone has any questions or wants to follow up, I'm available. I believe both Tara and Carl have my email. You're all welcome to email me anytime. It's been a privilege being with you. I wish you all the best, and I wish you lots of success in the important work that you're doing.
Thank you, Joe. I can't believe I looked at the time. I'm like, has that been an hour? That was insane.
Yeah.
Let me just take the time on behalf of everyone here to thank you for walking us through that. It felt like a perfect mix of sort of, a little bit of theory and understanding our biology and like the acknowledgement that there's nothing broken here. Like this is how we felt.
Yeah.
But reminding us that we have some choice in how we work with our biology and how we take care of ourselves while we take care of other people. So thank you so much for this hour together. It is very much appreciated, and hopefully, just the beginning for, people who are learning new concepts here today.
Great. Thank you so much. Take care, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day.
You too. Thank you, Joe.